How you doing, guys? Today, a whole bunch of little status updates. As you can see, the senior rims, the front senior rims, are still here on the workbench. I tried to mount the center into the rim, and I learned a couple things. Number one, my original plan to put them together didn't work, obviously, as you can tell. It was just a bear, unbelievable bear, to get this centered in the middle of the ring in order so the wheel wouldn't, so to speak, wobble when it rolled. And a couple things I learned. Is, number one, these spokes are not perfectly 90 degrees off the center of the hub, and the Miller tire rim is not actually true. If you put it on a surface plate, it actually wobbles side to side. So this actual line right here is not perfectly round. There is an actual wobble in the rim. So with that being said, I'm heading over to my buddy's place hopefully tomorrow to discuss how the best course of action is to kind of minimize the wobble of both pieces. Number one, the spokes and this wheel. Now, I'm not going to go re-engineering any of these parts. It's just what is the best way to center that into that in order to just weld it all together. The wheel might go like this ever so slightly, but in general, I want it to roll nice and true, and that'll be the project for possibly tomorrow. So more to come on that. The other little project I've been working on is this RJ. This one's not mine. It was mine at one time. I had rebuilt this engine, but we had a little corrective issue with it. For some reason, the cam pin decided to walk out of the block on the flywheel side. So the cam pin, which is right there, decided to slide this direction or vibrate that direction into the flywheel when the engine was running. So what I ended up having to do is slide another cam pin from this side through the block to keep the cam and the lifters and everything into place, and extract the cam pin from the motor from this side through the bearing plate. I peened the ends of the cam pin and then slid it back in this direction, which is the opposite direction for a Clinton, but I needed it to bite onto this side of the block. So I pushed it in and then I pressed it into place so the peen marks would bite into the block. I started it up the other day and let it idle for a few minutes. I was with a flashlight watching the end of this end of the cam pin to make sure that it didn't spin or move back and forth, and it seems to be a-okay. So this guy is ready to be picked up, and it's an interesting machine for a couple of reasons. One, it's a very early RJ58. If we take a look at the numbers here, hopefully it'll focus. Let me just see if I can get it. There it is. You can see this is a 1200, not a A1200 or a B1290. So that's a very early 1200. The serial 2184, that's a pretty low production number. Interesting thing is it does have a B ignition, which is kind of weird, because it's these early 1200s could have had an A ignition initially, and then they went to a B ignition. This is an early motor with a B ignition in it, which is kind of neat, you know, kind of different. The other thing too that's kind of interesting on this tractor, there's no date code casted into the center section of the three-piece transmission, so that there indicates that it's an early machine. As you can tell, it's painted real nice. I didn't do the paint. The original serial tag is still on it with the original serial number, which is under 2000. So real nice little machine. Just had a little bit of a technical difficulty with it, but it's all straightened out. It should be fine. It's going to be going back to the owner hopefully in the next couple days. Another little side project was the 1056. It's all packed up and ready for winter. The battery's right there. I ran it out of gas, and as you saw at the very beginning of the video, it was running quite smooth. It was fun. Got a lot of attention at the Zagray Tractor Show. Thank you so much to everybody that gave me cool comments about it, and they liked it. But the real project of the day, or for right now, is this, the little mule. In one of my prior videos, as you know, I made a smaller pulley for the transmission in order to give this tractor a little bit more of a giddy up, which it did. That machined pulley worked absolutely perfectly. There was no issue whatsoever. The issue that I'm having with it is this: it spins the transmission way too fast. The transmission whines really bad. Even at idle, you could just hear those little needle bearings, those little Torrington bearings in that input shaft just humming. And then when you're at speed, which is fun, man, this thing definitely scoots. The transmission just completely sounds unhappy. You can just hear everything kind of humming and buzzing, and you know, that's a little bit of everything. A little bit of a play in the bearings over the years. It's a little bit that the transmission wasn't designed to spin that fast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to a 4-inch pulley on the transmission. Obviously that's going to slow the machine down a little bit, but I've had the 4-inch pulley on it before, basically an original 3-speed transmission input pulley. We're going to put that back on, but that necessitates a little bit of machine work, and that is a special key, or a special Woodruff key, in order to have the 4-inch pulley, which is bored for a 3/4-inch shaft, work on this 8-speed pulley, which is a 5/8 shaft. I'll explain all that nonsense in a few minutes. Right now I'm going to just take those set screws off and get that 2-inch pulley off the transmission. So to get the 3-speed pulley onto the 8-speed transmission, because that's the 8-speed input pulley, I kind of have to make a hybrid key and use a little adapter sleeve, because the 8-speed transmission has a 5/8 shaft, input shaft. The 3-speed transmission actually had a 3/4-inch input shaft. So I used the sleeve in order to adapt to the 5/8. So this slides in, I'll show that to you in a little while, and that adapts the 3/4 to 5/8. So that's how we get the pulley onto the shaft. But when it comes to the Woodruff keys, it's completely different, or it has a little bit of a difference in general. Obviously the 8-speed transmission with the 5/8 shaft has a 5/32 Woodruff key, the thickness of the Woodruff key. And you can tell this is actually an original one with the little ears on it. That's an original Woodruff key for an 8-speed. The 3-speed transmission actually has a 3/16 Woodruff key. That actually has the next size smaller than this. It's not as big. I think this is a 1/2 inch. I think they have a 1/4 by 3/16 by 1/4. So in order to make this kind of work, or what I've done in the past, is I've made basically a hybrid key. I take a 3/16 Woodruff key, and I machine down, or I'll show you, I basically file down the bottom portion of the Woodruff key to 5/32, and I make sure that the moon shape is exactly the same moon shape as the original 8-speed Woodruff key. So that way it slides into the shaft, but it gives us the 3/16 width that we need in order to engage that pulley, the 3-speed pulley. But here's the problem: this one's no good, and the reason why is the height of the 3/16 portion of this particular Woodruff key is too small. It's not thick enough, and I'll show you that in just a second. With the pulley in the vise and the little adapter sleeve in place, you can see basically the amount of 3/16 height we need. Basically, it's from the bottom edge here to the very top edge of the sleeve itself. And I'm just trying to center this. And when we take a 3/16 Woodruff key and we slide it in there, we can actually figure out the height that we need for, we actually can figure out the height that we need for the Woodruff key. And of course, this is not going to focus. Come on, you can do it. There it is. And what I'll do typically is I'll just take this woodruff key. I don't think I can reach it from the back side, so let me just get a little pencil here, slide it in. What I'll do is I'll just push that woodruff key out to a certain point. I'll make a mark on the side of the woodruff key to the height that I want. That way I know I have complete engagement of the woodruff key, at least in the pulley at this point in time. So let me just take that out and let me show you, kind of like a cooking show. I've already done that. So there you go. So there's the line. So basically anything, the very, very bottom edge of the line up stays. Everything below that line is where the filing is going to come into play in order to shape it in such a way that, where is it? There it goes. So basically, we're going to create this. But as you can tell, this is much, much too thin to engage the pulley correctly. I made this one years ago. This was like my first attempt, and I obviously mismeasured that, because even if we take it and slide it into the thing, we can see that that is just totally not going to work. So can't use that one. So I'm going to make a new one. The first thing I'm going to do before I do anything is I'm going to start filing on either side of the woodruff key in a kind of a systematic way. You know, 4 or 5 filings here, 4 or 5 filings on the other side, back and forth, until I get the correct thickness on the lower section. The other thing I need to be mindful of, and the reason why we're going to do it equal on both sides, is that like half moon section has to be pretty much centered in the 3/16 portion. So if you kind of follow me, the 5/32 portion has to be pretty much centered within the 3/16 portion of the key. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a triangle file. I'm going to file right along the bottom edge of this line. That will create a little ledge and help me keep the file from kind of walking all over the place, my flat file that is. So let me get this line all the way around, meaning drawn on all 4 sides, and then I'll just make a quick scribe mark with the triangle file, and then I'll show you what the next steps are. All right, I'm hoping you could just barely see, there it is, you can just barely see the Sharpie mark right along the bottom edge of the adapter to the woodruff key itself. So that is on both sides. So that is exactly where I'm going to start my filing. Come on. This is what happens when you don't, there it is. When you don't have a good camera, this is what happens. Sorry guys. But as you can see, there's the line right there, all the way down. So now let's start filing it so that way we can make that lower section. Okay, so with the file line scored on both sides, so you can see where I took the triangle file and I scored a line just below the black line, and that is the top or the bottom edge of the 3/16 key. On the opposing side just happens to be, I took the original wheel horse woodruff key and I laid it on top. Let's see if I can get this to focus again for you. Come on. This close-up kind of stuff just doesn't work. There it is. So there it is. So what I did was I put the key on top of itself like that, okay? So that way I can make an outline of where the woodruff key is to go. Now I did off-center it, and the reason why I off-centered it is because the actual woodruff key slot in the input shaft is towards the end of the shaft itself, towards the outside edge. So I want the woodruff key to sit a little bit off center. So in other words, this will fit in the stock location in the shaft, but the whole key will move back just a hair. So that way it will fully engage the entire thickness of the 3/4 inch pulley. And what I mean by that is if we take the key itself and we drop it in there, okay, and we drop that in, basically, oops, it's real hard to show you with one hand, but basically the width of this key is the actual diameter here of the pulley. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to get the Dremel, and I'm going to hit the Dremel with a cutoff wheel, and I'm going to cut most of this section, this lower section off. So that way it keeps the filing to a minimum. So with the small little corner cut off with my Dremel wheel, or my Dremel with the cutoff wheel, I should say, I started to file and shape where I want the lower section of the woodruff key. I do have this small little cut right there. I'm just going to continue filing. I'm just using a rough file at this point just to get the shape that I want on the bottom. The biggest thing here when I do this is to make sure that all these edges are fairly straight. You know, they're at 90 degrees of each other, so that way it just makes the whole filing process a lot easier. The big thing about this is just to take your time. This is not something that you can kind of rip off in 5 seconds. So I'm going to just continue filing, get that rough shape of the lower section, and then I'll show you what my next step is. So with either end of the key kind of roughed in, I mean it's probably 90-95% where I want it, this end and that end. I'm starting to file the actual woodruff key portion of it in order to thin it down to that 5/32. I'm working on the first side right now, but you can see where I made that original triangle file cut line or score line in the woodruff key. Now I'm using that as the edge to actually file down or thin out the lower section. I'm going to continue working on this. I'm just using a regular file, nice and smooth, nice and straight. Every once in a while I'll go to a more coarse file in order to just cut some more of the material away quickly. I'll do this side just a little bit more, and then I'm going to flip it over and start working on the other side and kind of work both sides at the same time in order to get it down to the thickness I want, as well as trying to keep it as centered as possible in the key itself. So after filing both sides back and forth a little bit, you can see that my dial caliper is pretty close to 1562. It's a little small. It does slide into the slot of the shaft, but doesn't flop around. One of the things I have to do now is I gotta lower this piece of the woodruff key section. And as you can see, it's starting to come along. It looks pretty good, I think. Get my hand out of the way. I gotta file the bottom section of this so this whole thing drops down into the shaft, because this little shelf area on both sides is not sitting on the shaft. It actually sticks up a hair. So I got to file this down a little bit in order to file fit it to the shaft, so both these little shoulders sit directly on the shaft. Once I get that pretty close, I'll take it out to the tractor and show you how it fits in general. Okay, so there is the 8-speed shaft. Here's our little homemade key. And I'm going to just drop it right into the slot. And as you can tell, it went right in real nice and neat. The lighting's pretty bad, I'm sorry, but you can see, actually, let's see what we can do. This is not, you can see the two shoulders are not sitting on the shaft itself. So I need to keep working the bottom half of the woodruff section in order to get that to fit in real nice. But if you take a look at it in general, let's hope this thing will, there it is. You can see it's actually coming out quite nice. My edges are real straight. I think my problem's right there. You see how that kind of like really, it's not sharp, it's a big arc to the shoulder from the woodruff. So I'm going to need to file that down a little bit. I'm going to file the front half a little bit. I think the bottom is thick enough, or shallow enough. It goes in far enough. But as you can see, it's coming along. It's a matter of just file fitting it now in order for it to fit just right. Alright, so let me get a little bit more filing going on here on either end of the woodruff. I'll come back, check it out, and then we'll drop it in. The next thing after we get this to fit real good in the shaft is to get it to fit real good with the pulley. The hope is that the pulley will just go on nice and firm, but we'll see if we can get that to be done. So after going back and forth to the tractor and to the shaft, I was able to get the woodruff section of my key in such a shape that this thing actually kind of drops right into the shaft. both of the shoulders touch the shaft just lightly. It is a little tall, so in other words, when I try to get the pulley onto the shaft with this key in, it actually touches the top of the key, and it's causing it to, you know, cock up and basically wedging the pulley on. So what I need to do is I got the big file. I'm going to put this thing on there. I'm going to go like this back and forth until I can thin the top of the key down a little bit, and it's basically the same routine. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth until it fits. So I'm just going to do that, and once I got it slid on good, I'll show you basically the finished product. So after filing the top of the key, in order to get the pulley on to a point where I'm satisfied with, let's go ahead and put the pulley on the shaft so you can see that it actually does fit fairly well. Now bear with me here, only because I'm trying to do this with one hand, but there's the key. The key is in. It seems to be in, you know, fits into the slot good. There's no meaningful slop in that. I got the sleeve in the pulley to convert it from 3/4 to 5/8. I am going to try to do this with one hand. Oh, there it is. The key's coming out. Get in there, boy. Let's try it. Take two. It's difficult. With one hand, this is not the easiest project in the world. Alright, I'm going to pause this. Let me get this thing started, and you'll see. Okay, so now I have it just started. Now it gets to a certain point, and then it just kind of press fits right into position. There's absolutely no slop. It slides almost completely onto the shaft. The only reason why I'm not forcing it all the way, the only reason why I'm not forcing it on all the way at this point is I want to put the belt on the pulleys, and then I'll set the depth of the pulley itself on the input shaft, get the set screw, put a little bit of blue Loctite on that set screw and tighten it down. So there it is. That's how I get a 3-speed pulley onto an 8-speed transmission. Now, what's the cost-benefit analysis here? So the cost is obviously time. It took me about 3 hours to make that little key. And then obviously there's a cost for the Woodruff key that I started off with, which was about 99 cents. Now, the benefit. The benefit is it's a stock pulley. So when you put it all back together, if somebody didn't know, all right, you would never know that it's basically an 8-speed if you didn't see that stick. It uses the stock belts. It's not aluminum. It just, I mean, I don't know. I just like that setup. Plus it spins the transmission a little bit faster, so this thing has some faster ground speed. Obviously not as fast as the 2-inch pulley I had, but when I had this size pulley, the 4-inch pulley on this tractor, on this transmission, I never had a problem with it. It always rode real nice. Now, I even did the same thing over here to this tractor. You can't see it based on the belt guard, but I got a 3-speed pulley on a 8-speed transmission, and again, I've never had a problem. It always seemed to work just fine. Alright guys, thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, please give it a like, a thumbs up. If you like these kind of little side projects, please subscribe. And as always, I thank you for your viewership. Have a great day.